And I think the biggest thing, we're here today to talk about the signing day recruiting class, the first recruiting class in the Chris Ash era. Chris Ash just held a about 20-minute press conference, introduced all the recruits. It's an 18-member recruiting class. He's out there down below one level. We're in the Rutgers Welcome Center, and he's out there introducing all the different recruits. He spoke for about a half hour. It was more like a sermon than like an actual, meet and greet. I mean, he was out there on the podium, just walking around, brought a lot of energy, a lot of passion, talked about the culture and all the different things he's going to be implementing. I think there's a lot of excitement around a recruiting class. What do you think, Todderick?
Certainly, and he touched on a lot of different topics about things that he's looking to change, talking about the meal plans. The freshmen are no longer staying in the same dorms. There are a lot of different changes in the strength and conditioning program, the mental aspect of the football game that he's looking to bring to the program. So it's really interesting that he actually touched on those areas before really breaking down the different commitments and signees.
I think my biggest takeaway when I took a look at it, I've been covering Rutgers for a long time, you've been covering recruiting for a long time. Biggest takeaway, I think he didn't really have a whole lot of time to recruit, let's be honest. I mean, he came in, was hired December 7th, thereabouts. You stayed on Ohio State. There was a recruiting dead period, where he couldn't really have a lot of contact with recruits. So he really only had about 3 weeks to really dive in with his full staff. He did, I think, okay in New Jersey. He brought in 8 New Jersey recruits of the 18, and from programs that really traditionally produce a lot of talent: Piscataway, Immaculata, Don Bosco Prep, St. Peter's Prep. Programs that, even if these guys aren't the highest rated guys, maybe Ohio State, Michigan weren't knocking on the door to get some of the guys. These are programs that really produce a lot of talent, so I think that probably was key. What do you think?
It's a great step in the right direction for Rutgers, obviously, because you need to be able to formulate those bonds with the different coaching staffs out here in New Jersey. New Jersey's kind of a political state, especially when it comes to high school football and recruiting, so making those inroads will go a long way in the future. We also picked up some quality players from these programs. Just picked up the kid, Michael Maietti, just yesterday from Don Bosco Prep, who's a nice player, reminds me a lot of Brandon Sacco from a few years ago, 6'2", 265 pounds, can really get up underneath you. And you also help the relationship with Bosco and Toll and all of those guys and moving forward. And those big North United schools, I mean, they battle each other to the death throughout the season, but in the off-season period, they're like brothers. They're a fraternity. They stick with one another and have each other's back. So it's definitely good to create a stronghold in that area of the state.
The other thing, I think there were some needs. I mean, we all saw at the end of the last year, linebacker, not a whole lot of depth. You lose all 3 starters at linebacker. Certainly they needed to get some linebackers. Defensive back, secondary, I don't know how well they did in that area, but offensive line, they brought in a lot of offensive linemen. Certainly, you can never have too many of those. They filled their need with a quarterback who I want you to talk about, Tylan Oden from Tennessee. They flipped him from Louisville. What do you think about him?
Well, I think Oden's a long prospect with great athletic ability, can do a lot of things with his feet. A tremendous athlete, a little bit erratic throwing the football right now, but going into this next season, I mean, he could possibly be the best fit for the system that they're looking to employ. So it's possible that you could see him come on and have some sort of an impact, which will be rough simply because he didn't early enroll. But they were certainly looking for a face of the program. Recruiting your quarterback, getting him locked up is a first step, and being able to mold and build around him and being able to show this guy to other kids to have them come on and want to play with him. So I definitely think that was a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. I mean, you're changing over a system. You go from a pro style to a spread. Quarterbacks, let's be honest, Chris Laviano has some experience, Hayden Reddick. Neither of them really strike me as a spread type guy. Oden, I mean, he fits the criteria. He fits that mold of a spread type guy.
He certainly does. And I mean, Drew Maringer, he actually spoke for a bit inside. They talked about using the entire field as an offense. For a long time, Rutgers stuck with that pro style approach, almost in spite of itself. It's almost to be able to sell that pro style attack. But you weren't really opening things up offensively. Guys were playing 8-9 guys in the box and taking things away, and it was tough to have counteraction for that. With a spread offense, you spread the field, you're able to gut the defense up the middle, and you can even run the ball more fluently out of that type of offense. And it's just that day and age, even in Big Ten country, where you basically used to just line them up and knock them down. Guys are moving to these spread offenses. Rutgers has had a tough time dealing with these spread offenses over the past few years, so now they're they'll employ one themselves and take it out on some of the other guys.
I just want to let the fans know here, Todderick's phone is actually buzzing right now. Not to look at your caller ID, but I think it's a 5-star recruit from up north. The recruiting period never ends. Todderick's always on it. But touching on that, certainly didn't have a whole lot of time to build relationships. Recruiting's all about relationships, as you know. How important is really the next couple months are going to be for Chris Ash, entire staff, to kind of forge those relationships that kind of give you a leg up on that recruiting class?
Well, it's huge, and you'll see a couple junior days throughout February on the 13th and 20th, I believe, where they'll have a majority of the top talent in the state on campus. Rutgers has historically, well, at least for over the past 2 to 3 years, got those guys on campus for those events. Now the next step is being able to capitalize on those relationships and getting those guys here. They certainly have a plan in place for that. And I mean, also the cool thing about when signing day is over, as a coaching staff, you get to sit down and really evaluate what you have, where you're at as a staff, how many scholarships you have left, which opens up opportunities for some other guys that may just be hanging around. I did a post last night on a kid named Devin Robinson, who's a kid that Rutgers has been talking to. There's a kid, Thomas Lopez, who will be coming in to have a sit down sometime throughout next week to see kind of where he stands. Obviously the kicker position, losing a kid like Barbier to Penn State, that was a crucial blow. I mean, quietly, he was probably one of the more significant commits to the class, so they'll certainly look to address that position as well. So this is a cool time of year where there's a lot of stuff going on. Just because signing day is over doesn't mean that's it. And quite honestly, signing day means very little. I mean, kids don't necessarily have to sign by signing day. It's this big mythical day in which everybody, does what they do. But there's still plenty of time for Rutgers to go out there and recruit and add players. There's gray shirts. There's all different kinds of things that you can do in this position.
I was going to ask that. I mean, we talked about linebacker. You like what they did there? I don't know. I mean, they obviously needed a lot more depth at that spot. There's going to be a lot of playing time for a guy like Jonathan Pollock, who we talked to today, early enrollee. Solomon Manning, another guy, early enrollee. Lamore, another guy from Piscataway, right down the road. All these guys are going to have an opportunity to compete in spring practice. Just from that area where you have a need. And maybe there could be some immediate playing time. You see these guys as maybe guys who can see the field right away? Well,
the early enrollees certainly help themselves. They get here early, they get acclimated. You're getting a head start over every other freshman that's coming in. You get a head start on the eating program, on the lifting, on the bonding, on the interaction with coaches, and developing those relationships. So they certainly have given themselves a leg up. Kid I really like is the Solomon Manning kid out of Colonia. I'm a Middlesex guy myself. So I'm maybe a little bit impartial, but he's a tremendous player. I thought highly underrated, had a terrific senior year, made plays every single game. I felt like he was being awarded Rutgers Committed a Week almost every week. Got it twice. Just made tremendous plays, had a touchdown winning grab, big, long kid. You shake his hand and you get a sense of the power that he comes with. Another guy, Malorm Lumore, a big, long kid, can play anything from defensive end to outside back or to possibly even safety. He's long, he's super athletic, he's versatile, he's a postgraduate, so he's physically mature, benefited from that extra year, and he's certainly a guy that I could see getting in the mix early. Pollock, a young man who's boasted in a lot of circles as one of the leaders of this Rutgers football recruiting class. He's gone out on a limb and reached out to all of these guys and created bonds and relationships. And on top of that, he's a heck of a football player as well. So they've certainly done well addressing the need of the linebacker position. And as far as that defensive secondary, there are a lot of young guys due to the circumstances that have gotten experience. So now they're sort of becoming one of the more experienced position groups on the team. I'm sure they would have liked to do more along the defensive line. I'm sure they would have liked to do more at the wide receiver position. But again, those are positions that they can really look to attack now that signing day is coming on.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, you kind of touched on it. Areas where they obviously, decommitments happen. A lot of kids flip. I mean, we saw it all over the country. Losing the kicker, you touched on it. Probably, didn't really help the overall in the grand scheme of things. Are there any areas where you would like to see Rutgers do better at?
Again, the wide receiver position, just getting some playmakers out there on the field. I mean, if you look at the roster, they'll have some guys out there this season and some talented guys at the top, maybe somewhat top-heavy, but the depth just isn't there. And if you're talking about running a spread system, you need multiple wide receivers to put in those positions to be able to get out there, run those routes, and make plays. They've got good strength and depth at the running back position. I like the kid Taylor Douglas that they added. He'll add some experience, some age, maturity to that defensive backfield. Although he's always played running back for the majority of his career at Michigan. He's a grad transfer. But it's definitely an additional body, a long, lengthy kid who can run, a 4-star kid out of high school. So they've addressed a lot of areas. They got a quarterback for the future. Could possibly be for the present, based upon whatever type of offensive system they run. But just knowing, Laviano, and he does have some mobility. I'd expect him to probably get that job, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I guess the last one, I mean, you touched on it, recruiting's year-round, right? And if it wasn't, you'd only have a job for a month, right? I mean, luckily, you're a 12-month a year employee. How crucial is this going to be over the next couple months for Chris Ash to kind of get in? Now that he really it's going to be a honeymoon period, but now he's going to be able to introduce himself to like a wide range of coaches from around the state. How pivotal is the next couple months going to be for him?
Well, I mean, this recruiting class to me was house money. I mean, you got a lot of built-in excuses already coming in. Not a whole lot of time to recruit, and obviously we had this huge blizzard on one of the biggest official visit weekends, which certainly put a damper on that weekend. Even though there was still a lot of excitement on campus, it's hard to really experience what the school has to offer if you're snowed in somewhere and can't go anywhere. So listen, they were behind the 8 ball. They hit the ground running. They offered a bunch of other committed kids. It wasn't for lack of trying. They brought in, some talented kids. Maybe didn't get all the guys that they want, obviously, but next year you're on the clock. 2017, it's got a nice top-heavy class throughout New Jersey. Probably not as talented and deep as the 2016 class. There's certainly some names and some guys that they'll be getting on campus within the next couple of weeks to really start their relationships with, and it'll be interesting to see if they can come through.
Just to give you an idea of Todderick's dedication, the recruiting weekend that they had a half dozen kids on campus for visits. Todderick was actually in his truck, snowplow, making sure he got on campus, making sure he had all the scoops on all the different commitments. So Todderick was totally dedicated. We're getting kicked out of here now. Just follow Todderick. You want to plug your Twitter?
At Todderick Hunt. I'm sure most of you guys already know me. You get the latest Rutgers recruiting news, and I love to do it. And
you don't have to follow me, but follow Todderick. He has all the scoops on all the recruiting. Pleasure, and we'll be back for spring football.
Appreciate you guys.